Hello everyone, welcome to the Scroll Ensemble Classical Music Improvisation channel. This video is part of a series of interviews with all classical musicians doing anything with improvisation, to show how much it is already part of our scene right now. Find more interviews here and write to us if you'd like to be interviewed too, or leave a comment if you know someone that we must interview. I found out my next guest likes to improvise when I asked her in a break of an orchestral rehearsal if she'd like to improvise with me, and we had so much fun. Rachel Chaplin tours around the world playing historical oboes and also just started a new chamber music ensemble called Ohm, and I'm in it as well. And we're exploring the composer-performer idea, where we arrange and compose our own music in different styles and involve the improvisatory in different ways. In 1.5 weeks you can come listen to us in the UK, and links for that are in the description. And now let's go on to the interview with Rachel Chaplin. Hi Rachel.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me in your wonderful house. How does improvisation play a role in your music making?
So improvisation is hugely important to me as a musician. I think the way I would describe it is that for me, improvisation is the purest kind of contact I have between ideas and feelings and the sound I make with an instrument. So practicing improvisation on my own with others is important for me to keep this flow, if you like, between this space of imagination and how it comes out in the sound.
And how did you get started? What was your first improvisation memory?
Yeah, I have some great memories. I wouldn't have called it improvisation in those days. I grew up in a family, a big bustling family, 4 of us children, and there was a lot of music going on. And looking back, I think we didn't have very many toys at all. And the piano was a big kind of place of fun, maybe as a result. And my earliest memories of what I would now call improvisation are sitting down at the piano with my sister and making up sound stories, I guess. So we would, sit there and play very spooky music or dramatic music or quiet music and funny and entertain ourselves that way. So that's a really early memory. Interesting, I definitely had the experience as I went on with my musical training, classical training, that improvisation was less a central part of that. And as a result, I think, especially as an oboist, I didn't come to improvisation until later. And in my early 20s, I played in a sort of, I guess you'd call it like a soft rock band, which was actually in a church context. And there the expectation was that you play from chord charts, and of course there was no oboe part. So if I was going to involve myself in that experience, I had to improvise. And at that time I was quite afraid. I think I started that actually in my late teens. But I can remember still the feeling that, okay, if I'm going to do this, I have to bring myself completely into the present and my desire to take part. And actually it was helpful for me, it being in a sacred context, because the focus wasn't on delivering a performance. It was on something personal and worshipful. And that completely freed me. And then improvising became like this beautiful feeling of kind of swimming. So that was great, and then I've had some really nice experiences later in life with improvising with colleagues and yourself in rehearsal breaks and things. Yeah.
And so you mentioned earlier something about practice and improvisation. Do you practice improvisation, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I do. I don't do it religiously, but what it looks like is, I think, especially if I'm wanting to feel one with my instrument and sort of struggling with that, then playing an improvisation is a way for me to come into, again, that meeting of feeling and sound. And then that's very freeing. And what does it look like? It just looks like playing a note and then like kind of sensing or smelling where the note wants to go and following the path. Yeah.
And did you ever have any improvisation lessons?
I'm sure that would be great, but no. Having said that, I did learn the harpsichord when I was at school, and my harpsichord teacher did actually teach me some form of improvisation, which was that he used to play the chords, some Bach chords, for example, and asked me to invent a melody. So I guess that was the only teaching context, that I've had for improvisation. But otherwise, the free stuff for me, it's simply important that that there are no rules, that somehow you can really allow yourself just to, if you feel it, make a completely disgusting noise or whatever, that it's an outlet.
And if you think about the future of improvisation in classical music, what do you think about that? Do you have a vision or an idea?
Yeah, I guess for myself, I don't want to think too much about classical music. I want to think about music making and facilitating music making. I guess when we talk about classical music, we are both talking about a repertoire, and we're talking about a kind of training. For my part, in training, I try and improvise with my students and make that part of normal. And that's important to me, that just as children start to write their own stories in their broken kind of language before they learn to read, that we can somehow instill that idea that music is just another form of language, and invention should come from the beginning. And the children are naturally completely inventive, and it doesn't need to be a sort of separate discipline in some ways from early on. With regards to the professional life, I guess there are contexts in which it's just restrictive. It's not an environment where you can be invested in the artistic or the aesthetic, if you like, of improvisation. But in my life, I just am trying to create more professional opportunities where that can be a part of our creative process. And I guess as well, I think I compose music, and then you just see, the improvisation idea is really the point anyway of the sort of germination of composition. So that's, of course, incredibly present in classical music, because people are composing music. Therefore, they are harnessing that bit of improvisation, that kernel of the idea and the feeling, and they're crafting it and carving it, which is a beautiful process. Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like to say, that something I should have asked you?
Yeah, maybe one thing that I would say that has always rung true with me was this thing that CPE Bach said about, you know, his whole desire with the instrumental music was to move his listener. In order to move a listener, he identified that he had to be moved himself, and that it was in improvisations that he could most readily be moved and therefore move the listener. And I definitely have found that to be true, that you can find yourself very close to the true feelings and movements of your mind and imagination and heart, and turning those into sound has a beautiful feeling of immediacy. And yeah, that's what I love about it.